Clint Eastwood, the last unshaken voice of truth in Hollywood, appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote his latest film. But what began as a routine interview spiraled into something no one in the studio or watching live could have predicted. Mere minutes, polite smiles morphed into verbal barbs. Jokes lost their charm. Tension thickened like smoke under stage lights. And then it happened. Jimmy Kimmel, America's beloved late-night jester, stormed off the set, his face pale, his pride shattered, his mic still hot. The audience gasped. The room, once bubbling with laughter, now sat in stunned silence. Clint Eastwood just sat there, calm, steady, like a mountain unmoved by the storm it had just caused. The final line before the collapse, Eastwood's voice had cut through the air like a blade. "I came to speak truth, not to be your clown." Kimmel froze, a twitch at the corner of his lip, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Then, he stood, muttered something under his breath, and walked off stage live on air. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The cameras kept rolling. The band fumbled into an awkward tune. Producers scrambled behind the scenes, phones lit up. TikTok flooded. X exploded. Clint Eastwood ends Kimmel's career. This isn't just a talk show anymore. This is war. Did anyone else just witness Jimmy Kimmel get obliterated on his own stage? The moment cracked the internet in half. In under 10 minutes, hashtags like "Narng Eastwood vs. Kimmel" stormed live, and "Our Guardian of Truth" were trending in over 30 countries. Celebrities jumped in, some in shock, others throwing fuel on the fire. Comedian Bill Burr tweeted, "That wasn't an interview, that was a funeral for Jimmy's ego." Meanwhile, Eastwood fans flooded every platform. He's 94 and just crushed modern Hollywood in 20 minutes flat. This is why legends don't retire. And all this happened live. Viewers who tuned in for a lighthearted promo segment got a front row seat to a cultural clash that would ripple far beyond one stage. This wasn't just about a film. This wasn't just about Kimmel. It was a moment that questioned what entertainment even means in today's world. A man who has weathered Hollywood's storms for 7 decades came face to face with its latest face and refused to play along. What unfolded wasn't scripted, wasn't clean. It was raw, real, and unforgettable. It didn't just break a show, it broke the illusion. 1 hour earlier, the studio pulsed with quiet anticipation. Rows of empty chairs caught the glow of overhead lights slowly rising to full power. Stagehands moved with precision, taping off marks, checking mics, adjusting camera rigs with robotic rhythm. The house band tuned up, horns bouncing a few loose notes off the soundproof walls as if the building itself were exhaling before showtime. In the far corner of the set, Jimmy Kimmel stood with 2 producers, glancing at a tablet, tossing out potential one-liners. Maybe I say, "Still riding horses at 94? Or just writing movie profits? Too much?" One producer laughed. "Keep it light, he's a legend, but don't treat him like a museum exhibit." Kimmel nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. He wasn't nervous, not yet, but something felt off. The energy was different tonight. The laughter in rehearsal felt thinner, the crew more alert. Someone was watching every step, every syllable. Maybe it was just the weight of hosting Clint Eastwood, a man who didn't need lights to command a room. At 6:03 p.m. the side entrance opened without a sound. Clint Eastwood stepped inside. No entourage, no theatrics, just a tall figure in a dark jacket, his expression unreadable and his pace slow, deliberate. He looked around, not at the set, not at the camera gear, but at the people, studying them, reading them. His assistant, Maggie, followed close behind. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a clipboard held like a shield. Stagehands paused without realizing it. "Is that?" "Yeah, he's early." Clint made his way to the green room without a word, but his silence wasn't awkward. It was loaded, like he'd already decided how this night would go. Maggie peeled off and walked directly toward the control booth. She found Sarah, the show's segment producer, standing near the monitor wall, scrolling through the planned cuts. Without pleasantries, Maggie leaned in close. "Don't turn him into a meme." Sarah blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me." Her voice was calm but cold. "He's not here for laughs. No games. You don't know what he's like when he thinks he's being made fun of." Sarah offered, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We respect Mr. Eastwood. It's all scripted, light stuff, nothing risky." "Then throw the script out," Maggie replied, eyes locked. "Because he won't follow it." Backstage, Clint sat alone. He didn't touch the bottled water beside him. He didn't speak, just stared ahead at a silent monitor showing the empty studio, eyes focused like a man scanning a battlefield. Kimmel, meanwhile, had changed into his showsuit, a rich navy jacket, tie, half knotted, hair just styled, but his hands were a little too fidgety. He leaned toward Guillermo with a smirk. "You think he'll crack a smile?" Guillermo raised a brow. "You think he ever smiles?" They both laughed, but it landed flat. On the soundstage, the audience had begun to trickle in, the warm-up comic revving them up like an engine. Applause signs flicked on and off. The band struck a jazzy note. The lights dimmed, then refocused sharply on the sleek black desk at center stage. The director's voice buzzed into Kimmel's earpiece. "We're live in 2. Clint's mic is hot." Kimmel straightened his tie, exhaled sharply, and walked toward his mark with practiced ease. But behind him, unseen, the storm was already gathering. The stage glowed like a polished trap. Underneath the glitz, the warm lights, the crowd's hum, the smooth jazz riffs, it all looked the same, like every other night. But tonight wasn't the same. Not with him walking out. Clint Eastwood stood in the wings, expression carved from stone, shoulders squared like he was about to testify before history itself. He didn't blink, didn't fidget. His hands hung relaxed at his sides like weapons he didn't need to draw yet. At 94, Clint didn't look frail. He looked like a man who never learned how to fold. His eyes scanned the stage like it was a crime scene, one he'd seen too many times before. Everything was too clean, too rehearsed, too fake. Laugh tracks, cue cards, teleprompters, Hollywood's newest gods. He didn't say it out loud. He didn't have to. The judgment was already sitting in his posture. To Clint, the truth wasn't something you scripted, it was something you survived. And he'd survived everything. Studios that wanted to dilute his stories, critics who tried to box him in, generations who called him outdated. But he was still here. And he came tonight for one reason only. Talk about the film. Tell the damn story, then leave. Across the stage, behind the curtain, Jimmy Kimmel grinned in front of a mirror, adjusting the angle of his mic like a pop star on a red carpet. "Let's make it fun. Just another legend. Just another show." Kimmel was a pro. Polished. Quick. His rhythm built from years of balancing charm and sarcasm. He knew how to sell a laugh in 5 seconds and pivot to empathy in 6. But tonight felt heavier. Not because of the ratings, not because of the script, because Clint Eastwood didn't play ball, and Jimmy knew it. Still, he thought he could handle it. "I'll ease him in. Cowboy nostalgia, couple laughs, pull a story or two, maybe even get him to smile. Audience loves vulnerability in old lions." Kimmel had no idea he was already bleeding. Backstage crew watched monitors, sensing something was off. Guillermo sat silently by the wall, tapping his foot, eyes locked on the green room feed. "He doesn't talk much, does he?" one tech whispered. "No," another replied. "He listens." Meanwhile, Clint's jaw tightened slightly as the applause signs blinked on. The crowd was getting loud now, programmed like Pavlov's dogs. He'd done his share of interviews over the years. Carson, Letterman, even Oprah. But this was different. Everything now felt engineered to trend. "He'll want the viral moment," Clint thought. "He'll bait me, joke about my age, reference the cowboy hat, laugh like it's all fun. And when I don't give it to him, he'll push." Kimmel stepped to the curtain edge, rolling his shoulders. He didn't hate Eastwood. He respected him, admired him even. But he also thought he could control the room, like always. "People want fun, not lectures. That's what I do. I give them fun." He didn't realize Clint didn't come to play the guest. He came to confront a machine. The lights dimmed. The band hit the theme song. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the one and only Clint Eastwood." The crowd roared. Kimmel flashed his signature smile. Eastwood walked out slowly, deliberately, his steps unhurried but heavy, as if dragging the weight of old Hollywood behind him. He extended a hand. Kimmel shook it, firm, respectful, but for the first time in years, he felt his fingers curl back instinctively. There was something in that grip that said, "I'm not here for your spotlight." The two men sat. The cameras rolled, and without a word spoken, the war had already begun. The lights flared, the crowd erupted, and Jimmy Kimmel, riding the energy like a seasoned surfer, walked back to his desk with that trademark grin, just enough charm to carry him, just enough smugness to hide the nerves. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his hand for a dramatic pause. "You know him, you've watched him, you probably feared him at some point. Clint Eastwood." Applause thundered. Clint walked out slowly, expression neutral, not smiling, not waving, just existing. And somehow, that was more powerful than any grand entrance. He sat down without fuss, posture straight, legs planted firm like roots. Kimmel extended a hand and Clint took it. Brief, firm, unforgiving. Kimmel flinched, just slightly. All right, Jimmy chuckled, adjusting his tie like he hadn't just lost blood circulation. Clint, it's an absolute honor. A living legend. 94 and still making movies. I mean, seriously, do you ever slow down? Clint's voice came low, gravelly, and sharper than expected. Not until the story's told. The audience gave a nervous chuckle. Clint didn't. Kimmel leaned in, pressing on. Your new film, it's already getting buzz. People are saying it's pure Eastwood, justice, grit, truth. Sounds like Dirty Harry all over again, just older, wiser, and with less ammo. He laughed at his own joke. Clint didn't. Dirty Harry, Clint said slowly, was about a man who acted when the system failed. This one's about what happens when the system pretends it's working. The smile on Kimmel's face froze, then shifted. Right, he said quickly. It's definitely got that edge. But hey, any chance you'll throw on a cowboy hat again? You know, just for the fans? The crowd chuckled, sensing nostalgia. Clint looked at him like he just insulted his mother. I wore the hat when it meant something. Oof. The audience went quiet for a beat. Then a few, "Oh damn," whispers rippled through the front rows. Kimmel cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. Okay, fair enough, you've always been serious about story, but people also come to shows like this to smile, to escape. What's wrong with giving them a little levity? Clint leaned forward, eyes locked. Levity's fine, when it's earned. What's not fine is selling laughs at the cost of truth. Kimmel blinked, the smile now noticeably more forced. So you think comedy's the enemy? No, Clint replied, voice calm. But when comedy becomes a distraction from everything that matters, yeah, then it's a problem. Another weird hush fell over the studio, the tension now thick enough to chew. Kimmel forced a laugh. Well, I hope this show's not too much of a problem, Clint. We try to tell real stories too. Last week we raised $5 million for children's cancer research. Clint nodded just once. That's good, so long as the charity doesn't come with a punchline. That line landed hard. Someone in the back said, "Dumb," under their breath. Kimmel heard it too. Look, I get it, Jimmy said, his tone tightening slightly. You're not here for gags, but our viewers, millions of them, they come here every night to feel connected, to laugh. Don't you think they deserve that? Clint tilted his head. They deserve the truth, and maybe that's why they come to your show, to forget it. The crowd froze. Phones started lifting quietly. A few red recording lights blinked in the dark. You're saying this show's part of the problem? Clint didn't blink. I'm saying I didn't come here to play a part in a distraction. Boom. One woman in the audience gasped. A few clapped instinctively, not knowing whether they were cheering or panicking. Jimmy swallowed hard. Well, he said, trying to smile, trying to salvage. Let's get back to the film, huh? But the energy had shifted. The tension was alive. The crowd could feel it. And Jimmy Kimmel had just realized he wasn't hosting the moment. He was losing it. The spotlight seemed to shrink, not physically, but somehow it felt tighter, hotter, like the stage was closing in on Jimmy Kimmel. His chair suddenly too stiff, his collar too tight. The laughter from the crowd had thinned into awkward little bursts, half chuckles that came late, died early. He looked out, eyes searching for reassurance. Nothing. So, Jimmy forced a smile, his voice noticeably higher. You're not exactly here for small talk, huh? Clint Eastwood didn't answer right away, just studied him, like a detective examining a witness and not a criminal, not yet, just someone suspicious. I came here to talk about the film, Clint said, voice steady, not pretend to be something I'm not. Kimmel laughed. Alone. Right. Of course, it's a serious story. A man standing up for what's right. Classic Clint. Even the audience could hear it, the desperation in his tone. A compliment, yes, but drenched in panic, hoping to flatter his way back into safe ground. You know, I think a lot of people still look up to your work. Gran Torino, Unforgiven. You've always been that guy who speaks for the underdog. Clint's gaze didn't soften. I don't speak for them. I give them the truth. It's not the same thing. Kimmel blinked. Why do I feel like I'm on trial right now? The thought flashed so loud inside his mind it nearly slipped out. His hand drifted to his coffee mug, empty. He set it back down, trying not to fidget. His fingers tapped the desk rhythmically, just a beat too fast. The lights above felt brighter, the room colder. The distance between him and Clint? Infinite. You know, he said, forcing another laugh. This might be our most intense episode yet. Hope you're not scaring off my audience, Clint. Someone in the crowd laughed, just one person, and even that sounded guilty. Clint leaned in slightly. If the truth scares them, they're not your audience, they're just visitors. Boom. The air seemed to leave the room. Phones silently recorded. No claps, no laughs, just a weight that no camera could fully capture. Jimmy stared at Clint, and for the first time in his career, he had no idea what to say next. I'm losing them. His smile twitched, his voice caught in his throat, and just behind his perfectly prepped expression, the cracks began to show. The room was quiet, too quiet. No punchline, no music, not even forced laughter from the audience. Just silence, thick and heavy. And then Clint Eastwood leaned forward, eyes narrowed ever so slightly, voice sharp as a blade drawn slow. I don't play that game. Boom. The moment hit like a bullet. You could hear a pin drop, until you couldn't, because the sound of phones being pulled from pockets rippled through the audience like a wave. Screens lit up, red record buttons glowed, people whispered in disbelief, hands shaking slightly as they hit Lev. Jimmy Kimmel froze, his grin gone, his posture stiff, his eyes trying not to scream. Did he just say that, on air? The crowd was still seated, but emotionally, it was already standing, and just like that, the internet detonated. 11 seconds later, TikTok, our real truth media. Caption, Clint just humiliated Kimmel live. This ain't a talk show. This is an execution. 22,000 shares in 5 minutes. Top comment, bro brought a revolver to a pillow fight. 22 seconds later, X, formerly Twitter. Clint crushes Kimmel. Truth wins. Storm off live. Are you Truth Pulse? Clint Eastwood just turned Jimmy Kimmel's stage into a courtroom and sentenced him to irrelevance. Giotto Late Night leaked. Y'all, this isn't just TV, this is a cultural shift. Legendary. 98.3K reposts in under an hour. 34 seconds later. YouTube Shorts. Live. Eastwood ends Kimmel. Full uncut segment. 1.2 M views in 17 minutes. Comments section. I felt that quote in my spine. This is history. We were literally watching history. 2 minutes later. Instagram stories. Zendaya. That was an unfiltered. Chris Pratt. Eastwood didn't even raise his voice and still made it feel like Judgment Day. Even Elon Musk jumped in on X. There's a difference between going viral and making the moment. Eastwood did the latter. The show's control room went full red alert. Producers shouting, assistants running, a poor intern trying to figure out if they should go to commercial or just play reruns of cat videos to kill the tension. But it was too late. The clip was already everywhere, in vertical scrolls, on burner accounts, re-uploaded 300 times with 200 captions, edited with sad piano music or thunder sound effects or fake title cards that read, "The Night Jimmy Kimmel Lost Control. Clint versus Clout, a legacy strikes back." He didn't even yell and still won. And Kimmel knew. Even before the director's voice stammered in his earpiece, even before Guillermo leaned forward like he might physically intervene, even before a stagehand fumbled the next cue card, Jimmy knew. This isn't going away. A story had already escaped the studio. It was alive, burning, trending, and as the crowd sat suspended between disbelief and exhilaration, the most unforgettable moment of the night had just begun. Jimmy Kimmel smiled, too quickly, too wide. It didn't reach his eyes. His hands gripped the edges of his desk, knuckles whitening just enough to betray what the rest of his face was trying to hide. He cleared his throat, leaned forward like a host trying to regain control of his own show, and possibly his own dignity. "Okay, Clint," he said, forcing a chuckle. "Let's talk about the film again. I mean, isn't this one basically another Dirty Harry? Just older, grittier, more action, right?" He meant it as a pivot, a callback, something to lighten the room and tether the moment back to nostalgia, safe territory. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was the wrong move. Clint didn't blink, didn't shift. He just sat still, eyes hard and focused, the way a veteran sniper looks before pulling the trigger. "Dirty Harry," Clint said, voice cold and even, "was never about action." The crowd hushed. Phones stayed up, silent witnesses to the unraveling. "It was justice," Clint continued. "When justice failed, that's not entertainment, that's a warning." Boom. The studio dropped into a vacuum. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Damn." Kimmel's smile cracked. Just a twitch, but enough. Enough for the crowd to see. Enough for Clint to notice. Jimmy nodded quickly, like a glitch in the system. "Right, yeah, totally. But hey, people still watched it for the action, right? For the thrill, I mean $36 million in 1971. Adjusted, that's like, what, $200 million today? The desperation clung to his voice like static. He was holding on to numbers like they were a life raft. Clint leaned in, just slightly, enough to make Jimmy lean back. You count dollars. I count impact. You see explosions. I see a man trying to hold the line when everything else gave up. Another hit. The audience didn't even know how to react anymore. Some clapped. Some sat frozen. Some looked uncomfortable, like they were watching something that wasn't meant to be public. Why does this feel like a funeral? Someone whispered. Kimmel's eyes darted across the audience, looking for someone, anyone, to pull him back. They're watching me fall. He took another breath. Well, Clint, he said, voice slightly trembling, I guess we just tell stories differently. Eastwood didn't miss a beat. No, we value different things. That's not the same. The silence after that felt heavy, like the room itself had stopped breathing. Jimmy blinked rapidly, trying to swallow the tightness. In his throat, he had nothing left. Okay, he said, eyes wide, voice uneven. Let's cut to commercial. But even that line, his final escape, sounded less like a host wrapping up a segment and more like a man surrendering the room. As the director's voice scrambled behind the glass, the audience sat frozen. Applause signs blinked, but few obeyed. People weren't watching a talk show anymore. They were watching a collapse in Clint. Clint just sat there still, unmoved, victorious. He just stared at the desk in front of him, as if hoping it would open up and swallow him whole. His fingers, still resting on the cue cards, twitched. The last scripted joke he never delivered stared back at him like a cruel reminder. Ask about Clint's cowboy hat, playful nostalgia. How far they'd fallen from playful. The silence stretched. Not the kind of silence that happens when someone forgets a line, but the kind that lands after something irreversible has happened. Kimmel stood up slowly. No signal, no outro, no cut to commercial. Just stood. His suit looked too big now, his body too small for the stage he had ruled for years. His lips moved, forming a word no one heard. Clint didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He simply watched Jimmy rise, watched the mask finally drop, and watched a man walk away from his own stage. The band looked to the conductor, confused, hesitant. Finally, someone motioned for them to play anything. A few soft notes, a jazz riff half-heartedly tossed into the void. It landed like a balloon in a funeral. One of the cameras began to pan toward the crowd, instinctively hunting for reactions. But no one was laughing. No one was clapping. No one was sure what had just happened. The director's voice cracked over the earpiece. Stay wide. Stay on Eastwood. Don't cut yet. Do not cut. And so the cameras stayed, capturing it all. Jimmy's slow walk around the desk, past the band, past Guillermo, who didn't even try to stop him. He disappeared through the black curtain, not sprinting, not slamming doors, just walking, quietly, like a man leaving his own house after realizing someone else had taken it over. The audience remained seated, stunned. Some looked at each other like they needed permission to breathe. Others didn't even blink, as if afraid they'd miss something else erupting. And Clint sat there, hands folded, back straight, gaze steady, not triumphant, not smug, just unshaken, unapologetic, immovable, as if he'd done what he came to do, as if nothing had happened, as if this wasn't the moment that would be replayed for years to come on every platform, with titles like The Night Kimmel Broke, Eastwood Doesn't Flinch, Late Night's Silent Death. The stage lights dimmed just slightly. The band faded out completely. Time had stopped, and in the middle of it all sat a man who didn't need to raise his voice to make history. The show ended. The storm began. Within minutes of Jimmy Kimmel's walk-off, the internet split wide open. Clips from the episode flooded X, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. Even long-forgotten Facebook groups sprang back to life. Their timelines jolted awake by pixelated screenshots and captions like, Clint Eastwood just gave Hollywood its wake-up call, or Kimmel got cooked on his own stage. And the most savage of them all, this is what happens when you try to script a legend. By the 10-minute mark, the hashtags Clint Crushes, Kimmel, Duggar Stormoff Live, and Guardian of Truth were trending in 24 countries. YouTube uploads of the full interview crossed 2.7 million views in record time, while TikTok edits, with sad piano soundtracks, dramatic zoom-ins, and text overlays like Clint the Coldest, dominated the For You. Page, an AI-generated version of Eastwood delivering his line, "I don't play that game," while walking through a battlefield had already hit 800,000 likes. It was everywhere. The moment was no longer just viral. It was cultural. Mainstream media pounced. CNN led with, "Eastwood's verbal takedown leaves Kimmel silent. What really happened on set?" Over at Fox News they spun it their way. Truth versus tinsel. Eastwood reminds Hollywood what integrity looks like. BuzzFeed, in typical BuzzFeed fashion, asked, "Was Kimmel set up to fail?" The internet has thoughts, but it was Variety's long-form think piece that went deepest, titled, "Generational War, When the Cowboy Faced the Clown." Within 2 hours the piece had over 500,000 reads and was being quoted by both film students and boomers in YouTube comment sections alike. A fake online poll posted to X went just as viral. Who do you stand with? The results were damning. Clint Eastwood held a commanding 65%. Kimmel trailed at 30% and a meager 5% pleaded neutrality. Over 1.2 million votes were cast in under 90 minutes. Celebrities couldn't stay silent. Chris Rock posted a clip of the moment with the caption, "That wasn't an interview. That was a masterclass in not giving a damn." Zendaya took the diplomatic road. Respect to both men, but sometimes truth hits harder than laughs. Jimmy Fallon tried to defuse it. "Y'all, I'm calling in sick if Clint Eastwood ever books my show." But Martin Scorsese dropped the mic with a single Instagram post. In a world built on algorithms, Eastwood still speaks in soul. That moment wasn't scripted, it was cinema. Influencers and YouTubers piled on with breakneck speed. A channel called Crisis Commentary uploaded a 15-minute breakdown titled, "How Eastwood Destroyed the Late Night Formula," racking up 800K views within 3 hours. TikTok creator 8Pop Lit Queen went viral lip-syncing Clint's line in full cowboy cosplay, earning 2.1 million likes. Conspiracy channels claimed the whole thing was staged by Eastwood as a grand media exposé, while others argued it marked the symbolic death of traditional late-night talk shows. The culture war lines were drawn fast and hard. One side hailed Eastwood as the last real one, a voice of conviction in a sea of content, the final guardian of values standing tall while everyone else bowed to clicks and comedy. The other side came out in defense of Kimmel, arguing that comedy wasn't meant to interrogate but to soothe. That laughter was its own kind of truth. Both sides asked the same haunting questions. Do you want to laugh or think? Is entertainment supposed to be honest or just pleasant? Truth versus ratings. Pick a side. Meanwhile, behind the curtain of chaos, Kimmel's PR team went dark. No press release, no tweet, no statement, just total blackout. And Eastwood's camp, they issued a single line to the press. No comment. The film speaks for itself. That was it. No hashtags, no spin, no defense, just legacy, watching from the shadows. And just like that, one unscripted interview became a full-blown referendum on the soul of Hollywood. The glow of the television screen was the only light in the room. Jimmy Kimmel sat slouched on the edge of his couch, still wearing the same suit, though now it looked wrinkled, tired, like it had hosted a war, not a talk show. His tie hung loose, collar open. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft click of the remote in his hand. Play, pause, rewind, play again. On the screen his own face stared back at him, smiling too hard, blinking too much, talking too fast. Clint Eastwood sat across from him, still as a statue, a ghost from an era where men didn't flinch even when everything else burned around them. Kimmel watched himself trying to regain control, trying to shift the moment, to recover the stage. It didn't work. It never had a chance. He pressed pause again. The moment froze. Eastwood leaning in, delivering the line like a death sentence. "I don't play that game." Jimmy stared at it, eyes glassy, face pale. His phone buzzed on the table. He didn't look at it right away. Another buzz, then another. He finally picked it up, a string of missed calls, a flood of texts. Producers, writers, publicists, old friends, late-night hosts. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened a new message. Just one name, Molly. He typed slowly, thumbs trembling more than he realized. "Did I blow up everything for one joke?" He stared at the words, almost deleted them, sent them anyway. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then came back. And finally, her reply. "You were trying to be kind. Maybe that's not enough anymore." It hit harder than Clint's line. He set the phone down gently. No dramatic throw, no smashed screen, just silence, acceptance, a quiet kind of pain. He looked back at the screen, rewind, play, pause. This time he watched the crowd, not himself, not Clint, just the audience. Their faces said it all. Some laughing out of nervous habit, some dead silent, others leaning forward not for the next punchline but for the next blow. And in that moment Kimmel understood something he hadn't before. They weren't watching to laugh, they were watching to see who flinched first. And it was me. Ebia leaned back into the couch, hands clasped, head tilted toward the ceiling like he was waiting for something. Guidance, forgiveness, or maybe just sleep that wouldn't come. Outside, the internet was on fire, but inside this room, there was nothing left but flickering light and silence. The room was quiet, not the awkward kind, the intentional kind, the kind of silence that belonged to men who'd seen too much and learned to speak only when it mattered. Clint Eastwood sat alone in his home office, a modest room with wooden walls, shelves lined with scripts and old photographs, and a faint hum from the old projector in the corner. On his monitor, a rough cut of his latest film played, grainy, raw, honest. A man on screen stood in the middle of a courtroom, voice trembling with conviction. The dialogue was simple, sparse, but it hit. Clint leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching, not for the sake of editing but to feel it, to remember why he'd made the film in the first place. The door creaked open. Maggie, his longtime assistant, stepped in holding a phone and a printout. "Clint," she said softly, "the internet's on fire. You're trending in 37 countries. Some are calling it the end of late night as we know it." He didn't look away from the screen. "Clint?" Finally he blinked, looked up, looked through her. Then he spoke. "Let it burn." A pause. Then, "The truth doesn't need followers." Maggie stared at him, unsure if that was the end of the conversation. It was. Clint leaned back in his chair. The projector clicked to a new scene. On screen, his protagonist walked away from a crowd, head high, silence behind him louder than any applause. No hashtags, no trending topics, no statements prepared, just legacy, a film, a message, a moment that would outlive the storm. He folded his hands, exhaled, and watched the next frame roll in. The studio lights are off now. The set sits empty, hollow like a monument after a battle. The desk where Jimmy once delivered punchlines stands untouched. The chair Clint Eastwood sat in still faces forward, perfectly still, as if his presence imprinted itself into the fabric of the room. The echoes have faded, but the questions? They linger. Across phones, laptops, living rooms, and subway screens, millions watched what unfolded. And now, in the quiet after the storm, the only sound left is the voice inside the viewer's head asking, "What did I just witness?" Was it an overreaction from a late-night host cornered by his own format? Or was it a legendary filmmaker refusing to become part of a scripted spectacle? Was Clint Eastwood too cold, too blunt, too unwilling to entertain? Or was Jimmy Kimmel simply trying to bring a little light into a world already too dark? Do you chase applause or impact? Because that's what it came down to, didn't it? One man built his legacy on truth even when it hurt. The other built his on laughter even when things got uncomfortable. But last night, both came face to face with something bigger than themselves. And now you have to choose what it meant. Was it the death of comedy? Or the resurrection of something more serious? Was it about two men clashing? Or a reflection of everything we're all feeling? What's more powerful, joy or truth? What lasts longer, a laugh or a line you'll never forget? You watched the moment Clint Eastwood said, "I don't play that game," and then watched Jimmy Kimmel walk away, his voice stolen, not by rage, but by reality. And maybe now you're wondering, do you believe in truth or applause? That's the real question. We're not here to answer it for you. We're just here to show you the moment everything stopped pretending. So before you scroll, before you comment, before you share that clip again, ask yourself, do you laugh because it's easy, or listen because it's real? Do you believe in truth or applause,